The massive obsidian doors of the Galactic Council's judgment chamber slide open with an ominous hiss. Admiral Thorn Blackwood, Earth's chosen representative, walks forward, a solitary human figure amid thousands of alien dignitaries. The chamber, carved from a hollowed-out asteroid at the galactic core, stretches impossibly high, with tier upon tier of spectators from hundreds of worlds. The representative of Sol 3, designation Earth, will approach the tribunal dais, announces High Arbiter Vex Mora, her crystalline form glittering under the chamber's harsh lights. Her voice holds undisguised contempt. Thorn walks steadily forward, ignoring the whispers and occasional jeers. The council had expected Earth to send a delegation of scientists, diplomats, or politicians, not a military officer. But Earth's leadership knew what this was. Not a diplomatic summit, but a trial. You stand accused of breaching containment protocol. Sevis Alpha, continues Vex Mora. Your species has developed faster than light capabilities despite explicit quarantine orders placed on your System 5 centuries ago. Thorn remains silent, hands clasped behind his back, watching as holographic displays activate around the chamber. They show Earth ships appearing at various points across the galaxy over the past year, each appearance tagged with dates, coordinates, and alleged violations. Furthermore, Vex Mora's voice rises. You have concealed your military capabilities, refused inspection of your homeworld, and demonstrated technology that your evolutionary development timeline cannot possibly account for. The crowd murmurs. The Galactic Council has existed for 50,000 years, bringing thousands of species into its fold, always following strict protocols for advancement and integration. Earth had been judged a pre-spacefaring civilization just 3 centuries prior, deemed at least 1,000 years from achieving interstellar capabilities. Humans, Vex Mora pronounces the word like it tastes bitter, are an aberration. Your rapid advancement threatens the stability of this council and the harmony we have maintained since the Sundering Wars. Thorn finally speaks, his voice calm but carrying throughout the chamber. With respect, High Arbiter, Earth does not recognize the authority of a council that placed us under quarantine without our knowledge or consent. We built our starships without your assistance or permission, because we were never given the choice to request either. A wave of outraged voices fills the chamber. Silence, Vex Mora thunders. When quiet returns, she leans forward, her crystalline face catching the light in jagged patterns. Your insolence only confirms our concerns. The Council will now vote on Containment Resolution 12, authorizing immediate military action to neutralize Earth's spacefaring capabilities and return humans to appropriate developmental observation. Thorn's expression doesn't change, but he reaches into his pocket, removing a small black device that fits in his palm. Before you vote, he says, there's something you should know about Earth and why we've come here today. He activates the device. The chamber's lights flicker and every display screen surrounding the thousands of delegates suddenly changes, showing not Earth ships, but Council warships amassing at strategic points throughout the galaxy, all oriented toward Earth. We didn't break your quarantine yesterday, Thorn says quietly. We broke it 10 years ago, and we've learned quite a bit about the Galactic Council in that time. The chamber erupts in chaos. Delegates leap to their feet, shouting accusations and demands. Some reach for weapons only to find them mysteriously non-functional. Vex Mora slams her gavel repeatedly, but the uproar continues until Thorn raises his hand. A pulse of energy ripples through the chamber and every voice is instantly silenced. Mouths move but no sound emerges. You should know, Thorn continues calmly, that we've been monitoring your communications for years. We know about your development assessments and how you've been deliberately suppressing the growth of certain species. He taps the device again, and new images appear. Planets being bombarded, civilizations reduced to rubble, species being forcibly relocated. Documents flash by too quick for most to read, but the titles are clear. Culling Protocol, Species Restriction Mandate, Developmental Regression Guidelines. We know about the 23 worlds you've reset in the past millennium because they developed too quickly or in ways you didn't approve of, Thorn says. We know about the technologies you've kept for yourselves while feeding scraps to your so-called protectorate worlds. A tall reptilian counselor manages to break through the silence field. This is treason. Guard unit seize the human. Armed figures move from the shadows toward Thorn, but stop suddenly as their armor locks in place, rendering them immobile. Your security systems are impressive, Thorn notes, or they were, until we spent a few years studying and improving them. Currently, all weapons in this chamber are disabled, all communications are blocked, and every ship in the Galactic Core fleet is temporarily powered down. He lets that sink in before continuing. Earth ships have positioned themselves throughout Council space, not as invaders, but as observers and, if necessary, defenders. We're not here to destroy what you've built, but we will not allow you to destroy us. Vexmora, visibly shaking with rage, manages to speak through the silence field. You cannot possibly have the resources or numbers to challenge the combined might of the Council. Numbers? Thorn smiles slightly. No, we're just one world against thousands. But you've spent so long manipulating other species, keeping them dependent and obedient, that you've forgotten what true innovation looks like. What happens when a species is left to solve its own problems, to develop without interference? He releases the silence field, and the chamber fills with anxious murmuring. Earth doesn't seek war, Thorn says, his voice cutting through the noise. But we're not here to be judged. We're here to deliver an ultimatum. He steps closer to the tribunal dais, eyes locked with Vexmora's. The quarantine ends today. The manipulation ends today. The culling protocols end today. Earth claims its place among the stars not as your subject but as your equal. And any action taken against our world or our ships will be met with immediate and proportional response. Thorn turns to face the assembled delegates. We offer friendship to those who desire it, neutrality to those who prefer it, and fair warning to those who would threaten us. Humanity will not be contained. The final image appears on the displays. Earth's full fleet, vastly larger than what the Council had detected, emerging from hiding places throughout the galaxy. You have one standard rotation to consider your response, Thorn concludes. Choose wisely. As he turns to leave, a soft-spoken delegate from a world near Earth raises a tentative hand. And if we refuse your terms? Thorn pauses at the chamber doors. The Council chamber descended into pandemonium the moment Admiral Thorn Blackwood exited through the massive obsidian doors. Delegates from 1,000 worlds shouted over each other, some calling for immediate military action against Earth, others demanding verification of the humans' claims. High Arbiter Vexmora's crystalline form pulsed with angry light as she repeatedly struck her resonance gavel. Order. The Council will have order. In a private chamber adjacent to the main hall, Thorn sat calmly at a small table, sipping water from a container he'd brought with him. Bringing his own supplies was standard protocol. Never trust alien refreshments. The door slid open, and a delegation of 5 Council representatives entered. Their body language conveyed a mixture of fear, anger, and reluctant respect. You have thrown the Council into chaos, said Joel Nar, a tall, willowy being with 6 arms and skin like burnished copper. As the Council's chief diplomat, he was known for resolving conflicts between member species. Do you realize what you've done? Expose the truth, Thorn replied simply. Something long overdue. How did you discover the quarantine? Asked another delegate, a methane-breathing entity floating in a specialized environment suit. We had monitoring systems in place, Thorn smiled faintly. Those systems were designed to detect conventional radio transmissions and energy signatures. They weren't looking for someone studying the patterns of your observer satellites. The scene shifted to Earth 20 years earlier. A young astronomer named Lyra Navarro sat in a modest observatory, puzzling over anomalous data from her telescope array. Strange objects in Earth's vicinity were moving in patterns that defied natural orbital mechanics. Director Brennan, she said, pushing her findings across the desk to her superior at the Global Space Initiative. These aren't asteroids or space junk. They're maintaining position, adjusting course. They're artificial. Brennan studied the data, his face grave, and they're not ours. Within months, a secret task force was assembled. The world's best scientists, engineers, and military minds working under the guise of a new satellite communications project. Their real mission: determine who was watching Earth and why. Dr. Navarro made the breakthrough when she detected faint energy pulses between the objects and distant points beyond the solar system. The pulses followed patterns, a language. It took us 3 years to decode enough of your transmissions to understand what we were dealing with, Thorn explained to the Council delegates. Another 2 years to confirm our worst fears. Earth was under quarantine by an interstellar government, that had decided our fate without our knowledge or consent. The quarantine was for your protection, Jolnar insisted. Young species often destroy themselves when they advance too quickly. A convenient justification for control, Thorn countered. But we quickly realized we needed to keep our discovery secret, even from our own people. If the Council detected that we knew about them, they might take more drastic action. On Earth, the Shadow Space program began. Official space agencies continued their plodding pace of development, serving as a perfect cover. Meanwhile, in secret facilities buried beneath mountains and hidden in ocean trenches, humanity made quantum leaps in propulsion, materials science, and energy generation. We knew we couldn't match your numbers, Thorn continued, so we focused on stealth and information gathering. Our first ships left Earth 8 years ago, designed to be undetectable by your monitoring systems. We established what we called the Sentinel Network, hidden outposts throughout the galaxy, learning, watching, preparing. Impossible, hissed a reptilian counselor. No species advances from planetary to interstellar travel that quickly without outside help. That's what puzzled us too, Thorn admitted. Until we found the ruins on Mars. The delegates exchanged alarmed glances. Yes, we know who we are, Thorn said quietly. Or rather, who we were. The ruins contained enough data to piece together the truth. Humans aren't just another evolving species. We're the descendants of those you call the progenitors. The race you overthrew in the Sundering Wars and whose name you've tried to erase from galactic history. Lies. The reptilian counselor slammed a clawed fist on the table. The progenitors were monsters who enslaved half the galaxy before we united against them. History written by the victors, Thorn replied calmly. But genetic markers don't lie, nor do the activation sequences that only respond to human DNA, built into technology scattered throughout the galaxy. Technology your council has been trying to reverse engineer for millennia, without success. In the main chamber, the emergency session continued as Vexismora presented evidence to counter the humans' claims. But with each projection she displayed, more doubts crept into the delegates' minds. Reports of Council fleet movements exactly matching those Thorn had revealed. Classified documents about species assessment and containment that matched his accusations with uncomfortable precision. The human has accessed restricted archives, she declared. This is not just a breach of quarantine but a direct attack on Council security. I call for an immediate vote on Containment Resolution 12. The vote passed by a narrow margin. Orders were transmitted to the Council's mighty armada. Neutralize Earth's spacefaring capability, secure the Sol system, and implement a permanent containment field around the planet. In the private chamber, Thorn's device beeped softly. He checked it and stood. It appears your council has made its decision, he said. I'm sorry it came to this. What have you done to our ships? Demanded Jolnar. Your device indicated they were powered down. A temporary measure to prevent rash actions, Thorn said. They're operational again, as you'll soon see. I had hoped for diplomacy but prepared for the alternative. As if on cue, the chamber's walls became transparent, revealing the vastness of space outside the Council station. In the distance, a massive fleet of Council warships shifted formation, weapons charging as they oriented toward the coordinates for Earth. You can't possibly hope to stop them, said the methane breather. That's the 7th Fleet, over 300 capital ships with planet-killer capabilities. Thorn watched the ships with a strange calm. We've had a decade to study your weapons, your defenses, your tactics. We hoped it wouldn't come to this, but we're ready. The Council warships suddenly accelerated to FTL speed, vanishing into the blackness of space on their mission to subjugate Earth. You've killed your world, the reptilian counselor said with grim satisfaction. Thorn shook his head. No, you've just awakened it. Hours later, the Council chamber erupted in confusion as communications came in from the fleet. The warships had dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Sol system, only to find it surrounded by a previously undetected energy field. As they attempted to penetrate it, the field had pulsed once, and every ship in the fleet had simply stopped. No destruction, no battle. Their systems remained online, life support functional, but propulsion and weapons were completely non-responsive. On the main display, a message appeared from Admiral Thorn Blackwood. Now safely back aboard an Earth vessel. Consider this demonstration a gesture of restraint. Your fleet is unharmed, but will remain immobilized for 24 hours. When control is restored, you may retrieve your ships, which will now only operate in defensive configurations. Earth extends an open hand to species who wish peaceful relations. For those who supported the attack on our world, consider yourselves on notice. The children of the progenitors have returned to the stars, and this time, we remember our history. As the message faded, Vex Mora stared in disbelief at reports coming in from across Council space. More Earthships were appearing, emerging from hiding. Not hundreds, but thousands. A fleet that had been building in secret for years, and something else was happening. Ancient devices on dozens of worlds, artifacts the Council had studied fruitlessly for millennia, were suddenly activating, responding to signals from the Earth vessels. Panic gripped the Galactic Council station as reports flooded in from across Council space. The main chamber, once a place of order and ceremony, now resembled a war room. Emergency lights cast an ominous red glow over the gathered delegates as they watched with mounting horror, as display after display showed the same thing. Ancient devices, long-dormant relics from before the Sundering Wars, were activating across 100 worlds. High Arbiter Vex Mora stood at the center of the chaos, her crystalline form pulsing with angry light as she barked orders to her staff. Her authority, once absolute, was crumbling with each new report. "How is this possible?" she demanded. "These artifacts have been inert for 50,000 years. A holographic projection appeared above the central dais. Admiral Thorn Blackwood standing on the bridge of an Earth vessel. "They were never inert," he explained calmly. "They were waiting. For us?" Vex Mora's crystalline fingers clenched into fists. "This is a declaration of war against the entire Council." "No," Thorn replied. "It's a declaration of independence. Earth doesn't seek conflict. We've had ample opportunity to strike at the heart of Council power and chose restraint instead. Your fleet near Earth remains unharmed, merely neutralized. What do you want?" asked a delegate from the Proxian Confederacy, one of the oldest Council members. "Recognition, autonomy, and accountability for those who've abused their power." The chamber erupted in shouting until a thunderous voice cut through the chaos. "Enough!" The delegates fell silent as General Chorus, Supreme Commander of the Council Defense Forces, strode into the chamber. A massive being with granite-like skin etched with luminous battle scars, Chorus commanded immediate respect even from Vex Mora. "The human speaks truth," Chorus declared, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "I have reviewed their evidence. The containment protocols have been misused. Species development assessment has become a tool for control rather than guidance." Vex Mora turned on him in fury. "You overstep your authority, General." "And you have lost yours, Arbiter," he replied coldly. "I have seen the reports you concealed. From the full Council, the species deemed incompatible with galactic stability that were reset to pre-industrial development or worse. Chorus approached the central platform and activated a secure data node. Files that had been restricted to the highest levels of Council leadership became visible to all delegates. 27 civilizations, he said gravely, not guided or protected, but deliberately stunted or destroyed because they developed along paths the Leadership Council found threatening. The delegates watched in growing horror as the evidence mounted. Images of vibrant worlds reduced to primitive states, civilizations with promising technologies suddenly experiencing catastrophic natural disasters, entire species redirected away from paths that might have rivaled Council power. "This is why Earth concealed their true capabilities," Chorus continued. "Not out of hostility, but out of necessity." On his ship, Admiral Thorn nodded solemnly. "We discovered these protocols 8 years ago when we gained access to Council archives. We knew then that revealing ourselves too soon would result in our own containment." The scene shifted to Earth 5 years earlier. In a hardened facility beneath the Atlantic Ocean, Dr. Lyra Navarro stood before the Global Defense Council, presenting her latest findings. "The progenitor technology responds to our genetic markers," she explained. "The ruins on Mars were only the beginning. We've since located 17 outposts in our solar system alone, each containing technology thousands of years beyond our own development. And beyond the Council's," added General Rivera. "Earth's military representative." "Correct," Navarro confirmed. "From what we can determine, the progenitors, our ancestors, were defeated through numbers, not superior technology. The coalition that became today's Council overwhelmed them through sheer force. then systematically erased their history and contained any world suspected of carrying progenitor DNA. Including Earth, Rivera said. Yes, we were quarantined not because we're dangerous, but because we're heirs to technology the Council can't control. Back in the Council chamber, the revelation was causing fractures along long-established lines. Species that had always been treated as junior members were suddenly questioning the authority structure that had kept them there. The human fleet is not attacking, General Chorus emphasized. They're simply standing watch as these ancient systems reactivate. And what do these systems do? Demanded a nervous delegate. On cue, Admiral Thorne activated another display. They're a network, a vast interconnected system designed to share knowledge, resources, and protection across the galaxy. What your histories call the Progenitor Dominion wasn't an empire of conquest. It was a federation of worlds linked by these devices, sharing technology and defending each other. Lies, hissed Vex Mora. The progenitors were tyrants who were demonized by those who overthrew them. Chorus interrupted. I've studied our military archives extensively, Arbiter. The true records, not the sanitized versions taught to our young, tell a different story. As they argued, a delegation from the Drelid Confederation, traditionally neutral in Council politics, requested a private audience with Admiral Thorne. On a secure channel, their ambassador spoke urgently. We've maintained secret records from before the Sundering Wars, the Drelid explained. Our ancestors chose neutrality in that conflict, but preserved the truth. What you say about the progenitors aligns with our historical archive. Thorne nodded. Then you understand why we had to act as we did. Yes, and we're not alone. The ambassador's expression became grave. But you must know, there are those within the Council who will never accept a return of progenitor influence no matter how benign. They're preparing a desperate measure even now. As if confirming this warning, alarms blared throughout the Council station. General Chorus received an emergency communication and turned to the Assembly, his expression grim. The Leadership Council has invoked Emergency Protocol Omega, he announced. They've activated the Sentinel fleet without full Council authorization. Murmurs of fear spread through the chamber. The Sentinel fleet, the Council's ultimate weapon, planet killers kept in deep sleep at the edge of the galaxy, to be awakened only in civilization-threatening emergencies. On his ship, Thorne received the alert. We anticipated this, he told his crew calmly. Activate the Aegis network. Across the galaxy, more of the ancient devices illuminated, not with aggression, but with a protective glow. Energy fields began to form, connecting between worlds where the devices had activated. What you're seeing, Thorne explained to the Council, is the original purpose of progenitor technology. Not conquest, but protection. The network was designed to shield worlds from exactly the kind of apocalyptic weapons your Leadership Council is now deploying. In the Council chamber, Vex Mora and her loyalists had withdrawn to a secure area, attempting to direct the Sentinel fleet. But General Chorus, supported by an increasing number of delegates, was actively countermanding their orders. This has gone far enough, Chorus declared. By the ancient charter of the Council itself, I call for a vote of removal against the current leadership. As the political crisis within the Council escalated, the real test approached. At the edge of Council space, the massive Sentinel ships, each nearly the size of a small moon, were powering up their main weapons. Their target, Earth and any world showing signs of active progenitor technology. Admiral Thorne stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display as the monstrous vessels approached. His crew looked to him anxiously. Sir, his second-in-command asked quietly, can the Aegis network withstand that kind of firepower? It's just been reactivated after 50,000 years. Thorne's expression remained calm, but his eyes betrayed the weight of the moment. The Sentinel fleet emerged from the darkness of deep space like ancient leviathans awakening from slumber. 12 massive vessels, each larger than Earth's moon, their hulls black as the void and etched with glowing red patterns like veins of molten rock. They had been built in the aftermath of the Sundering Wars, designed with a single purpose: to end threats to the Galactic Council's supremacy with overwhelming, unstoppable force. On the bridge of the Earth flagship Defiant, Admiral Thorne Blackwood watched the tactical displays with outward calm that belied the tension in his shoulders. The Sentinel vessels were positioning, themselves in a formation that would allow them to simultaneously strike Earth and several other worlds where progenitor technology had activated. Status of the Aegis network? He asked. His science officer, Dr. Elena Reyes, studied her console with intense focus. Operating at 67% capacity, Admiral. The older nodes are still coming online, but... She hesitated. Sir, even at full strength, our simulations suggest the network wasn't designed to withstand weapons of this magnitude. Thorne nodded slowly. Then we moved to Plan Prometheus. Throughout the Earth fleet, commanders received their orders. Ships began to move with precision, taking positions near the ancient progenitor devices scattered across the galaxy. Each vessel carried specialized equipment developed in secret over the past decade, technology that merged human innovation with recovered progenitor science. In the council chamber, the political crisis had reached its breaking point. General Chorus and his supporters had physically separated the leadership council from their command systems, but not before Vex Mora had transmitted final attack authorization to the Sentinel fleet. You cannot stop this, Vex Mora said, her crystalline form pulsing with dark energy. The Sentinels answer only to the highest authority. The progenitor legacy will be purged once and for all. General Chorus turned away from her in disgust. Then you doom us all. You've learned nothing from history. On the main display, the delegates watched as the Sentinel fleet moved into final attack position. Their massive weapon systems began charging, creating distortions in space-time visible even on the sensors of the Council station. Energy buildup detected, reported a technician. They're preparing to fire. Across the galaxy on world after world, people of all species looked to the skies with fear as the massive Sentinel ships became visible even to the naked eye. Artificial stars of doom positioning themselves above population centers. Aboard the Defiant, Admiral Thorne opened a channel that would broadcast to every ship in the Earth fleet. All vessels commence Project Prometheus. Authorization code, Phoenix Ascendant. Each Earth ship activated the devices they carried, technology that looked deceptively simple. Crystalline spheres no larger than a human fist, glowing with blue-white energy. As the devices powered up, they established connections with the nearest progenitor node in the Aegis network. In the council chamber, Dr. Navarro, who had accompanied Thorne as Earth's scientific advisor, stepped forward to address the panicked delegates. What you're about to witness isn't a weapon, she explained quickly. It's a restoration. On the displays, the Earth ships connected to the ancient network began pulsing with energy. The progenitor devices, already partially activated, suddenly blazed with light. The energy patterns changed, becoming more complex, more alive somehow, as if the network were awakening not just to function, but to consciousness. Sentinel fleet reaching critical charge, announced a council technician. Firing sequence initiating. The massive Sentinel vessels discharged their weapons, beams of energy so powerful they distorted the fabric of space around them, capable of cracking a planet's crust and boiling away its atmosphere. But as the devastating energies lanced toward their targets, something extraordinary happened. The space between the Sentinels and their targets shifted. The energy beams curved, twisted, and then dispersed harmlessly into the void. It wasn't a shield that had stopped them. It was a fundamental alteration of space itself. Impossible, whispered Vex Mora. Dr. Navarro shook her head. Not impossible. Just beyond your understanding. The Aegis network was now fully active, connecting hundreds of worlds in patterns visible from space. Geometric lines of energy linking ancient devices in a vast web. But it wasn't just defensive. Information began flowing through the network, awakening dormant systems on planets throughout the galaxy. On world after world, hidden progenitor facilities, many buried or disguised for millennia, hummed to life. Not weapons platforms or military installations, but research centers, medical facilities, and environmental restoration systems. This is what you feared? General Chorus asked Vex Mora incredulously. This is what your predecessors destroyed and then demonized. The Sentinel fleet attempted to fire again, adjusting their weapons to overcome the spatial distortion. But this time, the network responded more actively. Pulses of energy traveled from the Earth ships through the ancient devices, and suddenly the massive Sentinel vessels lost power. They didn't explode or break apart. They simply went dark, drifting harmlessly in space. On the Defiant, Admiral Thorne received confirmation from across his fleet. "Project Prometheus complete, Admiral. The network is fully restored." He opened a channel to the Council chamber. "The Sentinel fleet has been neutralized. Their crews are unharmed, but the vessels will never again function as weapons of mass destruction. We've reconfigured them to serve more constructive purposes." In the Council chamber, the delegates watched in stunned silence as data poured in from across the galaxy. The progenitor network, now fully restored and enhanced by Earth's contributions, was already making changes. Planets suffering ecological damage began showing signs of recovery. Long-standing disease outbreaks on frontier worlds were being analyzed and treated by automated systems. Resources from resource-rich worlds began flowing to those in need through newly established transport networks. Dr. Navarro addressed the Council again. "For 50,000 years, you've used fear and control to maintain what you called stability. You divided worlds, restricted technology, and kept the majority of species dependent on your authority." She gestured to the displays showing the network in action. "This is what the progenitors, our ancestors, actually built. A system of mutual support and shared advancement. Not dominance, but connection." Vexamora, still defiant even in defeat, stepped forward. "And who controls this network now? Earth? You expect us to trade one master for another?" Admiral Thorne shook his head. "The network isn't controlled by anyone. It's governed by consensus of all connected worlds equally. That was always its design." He looked around at the gathered delegates. "Earth doesn't seek to rule the galaxy or dismantle the Council. We seek to reform it, to return it to the principles of mutual aid and collective advancement that it was supposedly founded upon." As he spoke, more reports came in. The Council races that had been most oppressed under the current leadership, relegated to resource extraction, or limited to pre-industrial technology, were experiencing the most dramatic benefits from the network's restoration. Medical problems deemed too expensive to address were being solved by automated systems. Energy shortages vanished as clean power generation came online. General Chorus turned to the Assembly. "I move for an immediate restructuring of the Council leadership, beginning with a Truth Commission to examine all sealed records from before and after the Sundering Wars." The vote was nearly unanimous. Only Vexamora and her closest allies opposed it. As the Council began its reform process, Admiral Thorne received a private message from his science team on Earth. They'd made a discovery in the deepest layer of the Aegis network, something that predated even the progenitor civilization. At the heart of the network was a strange structure, neither fully physical nor purely energy. It had been dormant for countless millennia, but was now showing signs of activity. The nexus hung in space between dimensions, neither fully material nor entirely energy, a structure of impossible geometry that shifted and changed as one observed it. Located at precise coordinates that linked the major spiral arms of the galaxy, it had remained hidden for countless millennia, its existence erased from historical records after the Sundering Wars. Now, as Admiral Thorne Blackwood approached in a small research vessel, accompanied by representatives from both Earth and the reformed Galactic Council, the ancient structure pulsed with renewed energy, recognizing the genetic signatures of its creator's descendants. "It's responding to our presence," Dr. Lyra Navarro said softly, watching as patterns of light flowed across the Nexus's surface. Just as the Mars ruins did. General Chorus, representing the Council, stared at the structure with a mixture of awe and unease. "Our oldest legends speak of something called the Heart of Creation, a place where the first civilization in our galaxy mastered the fundamental forces of the universe." "Not just mastered," Dr. Navarro replied, "transcended." 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation with the Sentinel fleet. In that time, a revolution had swept through the Galactic Council. With Vexamora and her inner circle removed from power, the truth about the Council's history had finally emerged. Archives sealed for 50,000 years were opened, revealing how thoroughly the victors of the Sundering Wars had rewritten history. The progenitors, humanity's ancestors, had not been conquerors but unifiers, creating a network of cooperation that had lifted thousands of species to new heights of achievement and well-being. Their technological advancement had frightened more warlike species, who formed a coalition that eventually became the Galactic Council after their victory. But the most startling revelation was that the progenitors themselves had been guided by knowledge from an even older civilization, the builders of the Nexus. As their ship docked with an ancient port that materialized on the Nexus's surface, Admiral Thorne turned to the assembled representatives. "What we learn here may change our understanding of life in this galaxy forever," he said. "We proceed together as equals." The interior of the Nexus defied conventional physics. Corridors curved in ways that shouldn't be possible yet felt natural to traverse. Surfaces displayed information in formats that adapted to each viewer's perceptual abilities. The entire structure seemed alive somehow, responding to their presence with subtle adjustments to atmosphere, gravity, and light. They reached what appeared to be a central chamber, a vast spherical space containing a miniature galaxy that rotated slowly, stars and planets rendered in perfect detail but at microscopic scale. "It's a control center," Dr. Navarro realized, studying the patterns of energy flowing through the miniature galaxy. "The entire progenitor network, what we've been reactivating, it was just an extension of this place." General Chorus approached a panel that had illuminated at their arrival. "These symbols, they're similar to markings found on artifacts across the galaxy, from dozens of unrelated species, as if every spacefaring race was meant to find their way here eventually," Thorne finished. Dr. Navarro carefully placed her hand on the panel. The entire chamber shifted, and the miniature galaxy expanded around them, stars and planets growing until the representatives stood among them, not as giants looking down at tiny replicas, but as observers within a perfect simulation. A voice spoke, not in any specific language but directly to their minds, conveying concepts that translated themselves into understanding. "Welcome, inheritors." The cycle continues. Images and knowledge flooded their consciousness, the history of the galaxy unfolding at breathtaking speed. They witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations spanning billions of years, each building upon the achievements of those who came before. They saw how life itself had been seeded across the stars by the first ones, an ancient race who had eventually transcended physical form entirely. The progenitors had been the most recent inheritors of this legacy before the Sundering Wars interrupted the cycle. Now, with humanity's rediscovery of their heritage and the restoration of the network, the pattern was resuming its intended course. "The Nexus is not a weapon," Admiral Thorne said with sudden clarity. "It's an archive, a teaching tool." "More than that," Dr. Navarro added, her eyes wide with understanding. "It's the key to the next stage of evolution, for all sentient species." The simulation showed them possibilities, futures where disease, scarcity, and conflict became obsolete, where consciousness itself could be preserved beyond physical death, where the boundaries between species dissolved not through conquest or assimilation, but through shared growth and mutual understanding. "This is what the progenitors were working toward," Dr. Navarro whispered. "What was stolen from the galaxy when they fell." As the simulation faded, they found themselves back in the central chamber. But something had changed. The Nexus was now fully awakened, connections forming between it and the restored progenitor network throughout the galaxy. General Chorus turned to Admiral Thorne, his expression solemn. "The Council feared this knowledge would make some species too powerful, a threat to the established order. But I see now, the threat was to ignorance itself. What happens now?" asked a representative from a world that had been under Council restriction for millennia. Admiral Thorne looked at the activated Nexus, then at the diverse group of representatives who had joined this mission. "That's for all of us to decide, together." 3 months later, a new galactic assembly convened in a space station orbiting a neutral world. Unlike the hierarchical council chambers, this new forum was designed as a perfect circle, with no position of prominence or authority. Representatives from hundreds of worlds, including many previously excluded from council deliberations, gathered to establish a new framework for interstellar cooperation. Admiral Thorne, no longer wearing his military uniform but dressed in the simple attire of an Earth diplomat, addressed the assembly. "The knowledge contained in the Nexus belongs to all sentient life," he said, "but it must be approached with wisdom and shared responsibility. The first ones left it as a gift, not a prize to be hoarded or weaponized. The assembly agreed on fundamental principles. All worlds would have access to the basic benefits of the network: medical knowledge, clean energy, ecological restoration. Advanced technologies would be shared as species demonstrated readiness, not judged by arbitrary council standards, but by their own social development and stability. Most importantly, no single world or coalition would control the network. It would be governed by consensus, with safeguards to prevent the rise of another Vex Mora or the abuses of the old council leadership. As the assembly concluded its first session, Dr. Navarro joined Thorne on an observation deck overlooking the gathered ships from across the galaxy. "They mocked Earth's strength," she said quietly, echoing the phrase that had become something of a rallying cry during the confrontation with the council. Thorne nodded. "They expected us to be primitive, easily controlled. They never imagined we would not only reclaim our heritage but expand upon it." Below them, representatives from formerly hostile species were engaged in animated conversation, sharing ideas and making plans for cooperative ventures. The knowledge from the Nexus was already bearing fruit. Solutions to problems that had plagued civilization for millennia were emerging through collaboration between minds that would never have connected under the old order. "And now?" Dr. Navarro asked. "What's next for humanity?" Admiral Thorne gazed out at the stars, his expression thoughtful. "We've restored what was lost and built something new in its place. But the first ones showed us that this is just the beginning. There are more galaxies beyond our own, more civilizations following their own paths to enlightenment." He smiled slightly. "The universe is vaster and more wondrous than even the progenitors imagined, and we have only just begun to explore it, not as conquerors, not as the mightiest or most advanced, but as one thread in a tapestry that spans the cosmos." Dr. Navarro looked out at the assembled ships, council vessels now flying alongside Earth ships and craft from newly liberated worlds, all working together to understand and implement the knowledge from the Nexus. "They mocked Earth's strength," she repeated, "but they never understood what that strength truly was." Thorne nodded. "Not weapons or technology or even the legacy of the progenitors. Our strength was always in our diversity, our adaptability, our willingness to reach out even to those who once threatened us." As if to emphasize his point, a delegation from Vex Mora's homeworld approached them, former adversaries, now seeking collaboration, on a project to restore environments damaged during the Sundering Wars. "The stars don't burn with shame anymore," Thorne said as he greeted them warmly. "They burn with possibility. I've created all 5 parts of your HFY Sci-Fi story. They mocked Earth's strength. Now the stars burn in their shame as separate artifacts. Each part is around 1,000 words and written in third-person style with simple, accessible language. The story follows Admiral Thorne Blackwood as he represents Earth before the Galactic Sea.